Today's guest is a force in every sense of the word.
The world can't continue to live like this where you have nearly 30% of people living under $2 a day, and then you wonder why we have mass migration.
And she's someone whose lived experiences sits right at the intersection of Black America, Africa, and global diplomacy.
You pack up your life, your whole house. You put it on the ship, and then you're told, oh, we don't need you anymore.
So we know what we know from the news, but you are someone who was on the inside. What was the facts that you saw on ground?
We weren't allowed to talk to the media. We weren't allowed to talk to our implementing partners. Like, we were working with local Nigerian organizations, and we weren't able to connect with them. And they were emailing us, calling us, and we couldn't respond. It was like that song, Davida, unavailable. Like, we were literally...
That is hilarious. So the U.S. government was unavailable.
Yes, the U.S. government was unavailable.
During our pre-interview, you made a statement. You said, we left the way the British left Nigeria. What did you mean by that?
You know, when the British left Nigeria, they just left. I mean, there wasn't any real transfer of knowledge and power.
This is the A-Force Podcast. Welcome to the A-Force Podcast, the show that celebrates American immigrants in the workforce. On this podcast, we spotlight professionals who packed their bags, crossed oceans, changed their lives, and changed America along the way. Because the truth is, immigrants viewed America every single day. Our job here is to celebrate them, document their stories, and learn from their journeys. So, if you love conversations like this, please subscribe, jump into the comments, and let us know which A-Force hero you'd like us to feature next. And for my audio lovers, the A-Force Podcast is streaming everywhere podcasts are available. I'm your host, Aneta Felix. Today's guest is a force in every sense of the word. She is a foreign policy strategist. She's a global affairs expert. She's a writer, a multilingual traveler who has lived and worked across 10 plus African countries. She's a former USAID development communications specialist in Abuja, Nigeria. She's a woman who's built businesses abroad, including a natural hair care brand in Rwanda. She's also a wife of 20 years and a mother of 3. And she's someone whose lived experiences sits right at the intersection of Black America, Africa, and global diplomacy. Her name is Alexanderia Haidara. Hi, Alexandria. Welcome to the A-Force Podcast. How are you feeling today?
I'm doing well.
Before we get too deep, I want us to play our culture swap game. You lived the full circle, like I mentioned. You were born in America. You were raised in Black American culture. You traveled to almost a dozen African countries. You lived in Nigeria, Rwanda, married into Malian culture. So you've seen both sides of the Atlantic, basically. And I want to give you some everyday categories. And for each one, I want you to tell me a practice from Africa you wish America would adopt, and a practice from America you wish was more common across Africa. Are you ready?
Okay.
Number 1, what's one thing Africans do in community life? And what's one thing in America that you just think would help African communities?
I would say we have a really can-do attitude. Like, we're really optimistic, and I think that comes from the culture of being in the United States, where you feel like, you can do whatever you want. You grow up feeling like you're going to be president. You're going to, be, this millionaire one day. You just have this, kids grow up with a lot of ambition. And I think that has to do with the opportunities that are vast here in the United States. So I wish I saw more of that in Africa, because I also, from talking to people, also feel like there's a little bit of hopelessness and discouragement from leadership, or just feeling like you can't build your African dream on the continent. You have to lead the continent in order to have a better life. So I wish I could see that. And then on the African side, one thing I do love about living in Africa is the sense of community, and how deep relationships are. They really take relationships really seriously. And I wish I saw that more in the United States, because we're so individualistic. I mean, we have family relationships, but it's getting to the point that over the years, it probably doesn't go more further than the nuclear family. But in Africa, you have your extended family, you have grandparents, cousins, and then you have family, friends. And we have that too, but it's not as deep and profound as it is in Africa. So, and I think that has to do with just the not only cultural, but also like just the economic structure. If you want to move ahead, you need to know someone. So you have to have those deep connections. And so that's one thing it would be nice if those two parts of the cultures across the Atlantic could switch because I think both add value.
Let's talk about food. What's one African food or dining experience that you love and that you wish that maybe America embrace and vice versa?
When we were in Ivory Coast, we would go down to the beaches and they would have like grilled food. Like you have these older, like Ivorian women with their big boo-boos and their head wraps frying fish along the coast. And it was like a lot of people and people were eating all night. It was like, maybe it was like 11 o'clock and someone's eating this huge meal of grilled fish. I haven't seen anything like that in the United States. No one does that. It's just a different culture. So you're not going to see everything everywhere.
Yes.
But I do like that. I do like that. I've seen that in a lot of Africans, especially on the coastal cities like Senegal. They do it. Ivory Coast, of course. I'm sure Ghana and Lagos, you'll see some spots like that.
Yes, it's definitely a business center.
Yeah.
They would set up suya, they would set up grills, they will have food. But here in America, you would have to pack your lunch
Yeah.
to go to the beach, right?
Yeah, right.
It'd be nice to go to a beach here and then get some grills.
Yeah.
How about work-life balance? You've worked in the US government spaces and in African environments. What's one workplace habit that surprised you?
As a former diplomat and working at the embassies, U.S. embassies overseas, every Friday is a half day if you serve in an African country. So you basically work Monday through Thursday from like maybe 8 to 4. And then on Friday, everyone gets off at 1. The main State Department does not do that in D.C. I mean, people are going home at 7 or 6. So that was one thing I noticed. And they kind of have to adapt that because of the culture that they're in. I mean, people work hard, obviously, but in Africa, people don't center their work around their life. Whereas in the United States, you tend to, like, your work is more important than maybe like making a phone call to a friend that you haven't spoken to in a while. It's really sad, but that's the way it is. And then on the U.S. side, I'm in the D.C. area, so this is a hustle culture. So people are always, asking what you do, where you doing that. So one thing I do appreciate about living in Africa is this wholeness of life. Like there's work, there's family, there's friendship, there's socialization. And, here it's just hard to find that.
So I want us to rewind and take it all back. Before you became this global woman who's lived in multiple countries, navigated all these identities, you were a little girl in Memphis, shaped by a very specific history and lineage. So let's go all the way back. Growing up in Memphis in a Black American family, roots that stretch back generations, what pieces of history would you say have shaped the woman that you became?
Well, I would say my grandmother, she was born in 1917. That was right when Jim Crow was starting to gain foot in most parts of the southern U.S. So just hearing her story, she didn't tell a lot about living up in Jim Crow because I think there's a lot of pain there that most Black Americans, if you ask them about their grandparents or their great-grandparents, especially those in my generation, they probably can't go into detail of what happened during Jim Crow because most people didn't share stories of what was happening. So I think hearing those stories going back, because I would go to Clarksville, Mississippi, which is where my family is from, every like weekend. And at the time it was boring. It was like, there's nothing to do there. I'm from Memphis, I'm a city girl. And why are we passing down all these cotton fields on our way to Clarksville? But as an adult, I really appreciate my mom really pushing me to go visit my grandmother every weekend and stay with her. I really cherish those moments. That's the woman who shaped me. And my mom, of course, she wasn't a global traveler, but she brought Africa to our home, meaning like we had African artwork, African paintings, African clothes. So she was able to bring the continent to the house, and that always sparked a level of curiosity with me.
Wow, that's amazing. You also mentioned your sixth grade teacher who brought Mancala boards, you know, what we Nigerians call Ayu. How would you say that sparked your imagination or curiosity into Africa as well?
Yeah, the Mancala boards, like we were doing math projects and we were playing games with the Mancala boards. And that brought a lot of curiosity too, because sometimes we would talk about history or racism or what's happening in the world. And so I always thought, well, if there's any part of the world that doesn't have the level of racism that you deal with here in the United States, I would say it would be Africa.
Wow. So, when you were a child, before you ever got on the plane, what did Africa mean to you?
As Black Americans, we kind of grow up with two train of thoughts. There's people feel like Africa is kind of like this barbaric, people living in the trees, hungry kids. And then there's this fantasy Africa, like everyone's walking around, there's kings and queens and royalty. And that's true. Like they had monarchies across the continent and they still do. So I kind of had this fantasy of Africa.
So, it's a love hate thing. It's either you think Africa is this Wakandan utopia or just how you see portrayed in the news. But anyway, let's talk about the moment that shaped you. When we talked before now, you mentioned a trip to Brazil, how that shaped your view of the world, how that, influenced your path down global development and the path that eventually took you to Nigeria with USAID. So can you talk about Brazil and how that influenced your journey?
So Brazil was transformative. When I was in undergrad, I had just changed my major from pre-med to political science, and that was already a scary chapter because I wasn't sure if that was the right pathway, but I'm really glad I just took that leap and decided to go. And so I wanted to study abroad. When I was in high school, I had classmates that studied abroad. They went to China and France. I went to a boarding school in New Hampshire. And so I had classmates. So that kind of stuck with me. I didn't get a chance to study abroad in high school, but I wanted to do it in undergrad. And so how did I get to Brazil? Well, that came from a visit to the African American Museum in Detroit. That was the first like really holistic Black American. That was one of the largest Black American focused museums in the country before they built the Smithsonian, the African American History Museum in DC. And so there was this exhibit that showed like the slave trade and where they brought Africans over to. And they showed Africans being brought to Brazil and to Cuba and Venezuela and Honduras. And so I was like, wow, I didn't know we had the distribution, like the slave trade had brought Africans from to all parts of the world. And then they showed the pictures of the foods and like the similarities and how like you had some okra sauces that they brought over from West Africa and they kind of mixed it with a Spanish rice, for example, to create dishes in Brazil or other parts of Latin America. So that sparked the curiosity. So Brazil kind of like stuck in my mind. And so when I was looking at study abroad programs, it was either Brazil or Cuba. And I was a little bit leery about going to Cuba because of all of they just make it so hard to go. So I just figured Brazil would be an easier option. So I chose Brazil.
You shared with me a specific story in Brazil during a pre-interview. You talked about you went to this ATM and you saw a mother with a child. Can you tell us that story again and how that affected you in some way?
There was this young Black woman. She was Brazilian. They call Black women in Brazil Baiana because most of the Black people live in the state of Bahia. And so she called me Baiana, Baiana, because I was a dark Black woman with braids. So for her, I was her sister, and I was just withdrawing cash from the ATM. And she asked me for money, and I just ignored her, and I felt so bad. I don't even think I looked back to see her face, but I could see in the corner eye that she carried a child because, they were always when we were at the study abroad program, they're always leery about security challenges, and you have to be watchful of where you go and how you carry yourself and how much money you carry with them. So I guess that kind of stuck in my head first before helping, but it helped me kind of like do some introspective thoughts about like what it meant to be Black American overseas, what it meant to be an American, and what is our obligation to help. Um, because as long as you have this high level global poverty, you're going to have, high level civil unrest of economies crashing. I mean, the world can't continue to live like this where you have nearly 30% of people living under $2 a day. And then you wonder why we have mass migration, why we have war. And it's because of the stark inequalities that we have around the world. So that just really made me conscious of who I was. I didn't want to feel that way anymore. So I thought at the time that if I pursued a career in foreign policy and worked in the Africa Bureau or worked in Latin America, that I could, not help her, but that experience symbolizes why I decided to go into the Foreign Service and pursue a career in foreign policy and international development. Yeah.
I want to backtrack a bit because you mentioned something really interesting. You left pre-med for political science. Number one, who does that? In America today, where most of the highest earners are in the medical field, you just told me a bit about what influenced our decision, but how did your family take it? How did your friends take it?
My mom was like, oh my goodness, she was really hounding me. And I think that's why I worked so hard to get and try to stay in the international affairs field, because I wanted to prove something to her like, hey, you can't do something with a political science degree. You can't. But I mean, it really, I think I just gave up on pre-med. Like, I had A's and B's in Xavier, but I think I got my confidence got shook when I took inorganic chemistry and I got a C. So I think my confidence just got shook. My professor was like, well, pre-med's not for everyone. And I think those are really dangerous words to tell a student. Like, never tell someone if they're like, especially you hear this all the time. Well, college is not for everyone. When you say that, then you're basically saying that this person's not good enough. They don't meet this. They're not up to snuff. They're not up to par to meet it. And if they don't get it, then they can pursue something else instead of working with them. That if that person has a desire to pursue that field, then let's work with trying to, position them so they can be successful instead of just using that moment where that child is in doubt and using that moment of insecurity and feeding it. We should like, hey, no, just forget about it. Just one class. You can... And then also I went to an undergrad that wasn't really supportive of if you're a pre-med major, it was hard to do study abroad. So that was another factor that came into play.
That path eventually took you to Abuja to work for USAID, and you witnessed something historic happen. And I want to shift into, your time with the USAID. But before we get into it, I want to give a bit of context for our viewers, right? The USAID, United States Agency for International Development, was founded in 1961 to lead America's global development and humanitarian work. Now, Nigeria became one of its earliest partners shortly after independence in 1960, and USAID has maintained a significant presence there in Nigeria for decades, supporting health programs, education, agriculture, democracy, the government, economic growth, you name it. But in early 2025, many of its programs were suspended or cut, including funding freezes in Nigeria that affected programs that have been existent for many, many years. Alexandra was working at USAID in Abuja when the funding suspension hit. So let's talk about what happened on the inside. What was your role at USAID and how did you get to go to Abuja in the first place?
I was a development outreach communication specialist. And so that includes like writing talking points, reviewing briefings, and prepping our mission director for upcoming meetings, and doing storytelling and writing, doing events. So that was my main role. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do much of that because we were shutting down.
What was the expectations going to Nigeria?
3 years. That was my original goal. That was going to be the contract for, with an option to extend. And I was open. I always wanted to go to Nigeria. I don't know why. I think somebody in Brazil told me I looked like I was from Nigeria.
You do look like you're from Nigeria. I'm not gonna lie. I know my Ghanaian sisters would like to claim you, but you look Nigerian.
So that kind of stuck in my mind, and so I was always curious to go. Then I'm a big Afrobeat fan, and I love Davido and Yemi Alade, so I was really looking forward to it. And then all this nonsense happened with USAID. It just really it really dampened my experience in Nigeria. I mean, I've definitely had a good experience, culturally, just trying to like move away from what was happening with the agency. But, sadly, my experience wasn't 100% positive like I wanted it to be because of what was happening politically in our country and what was happening to the agency.
So we know what we know from the news, but you are someone who was on the inside when USAID was cutting operations in Nigeria. What did they actually say? What actually happened? What was the facts that you saw on ground?
I mean, it was devastating because this is my first time being, because my international experience is more on the diplomacy side, like working at the State Department and working with governments on, different issues that we have. So on the development side, it's a little bit different. We kind of like implement like you have the foreign policy. Let's say we want to combat terrorism. Okay, now how are we going to do it? Are we going to deal with it from a defense posture where we're sending troops to Nigeria, which we hope that doesn't come to pass? Or are we doing it from a diplomatic posture where we're going to be talking to the government of President Tinubu and his administration and trying to find a way where we can work together? Or are we also going to work on it from a development? What are the root causes of terrorism? Why are people choosing this as something to do? Why are young Nigerian boys choosing to work with Boko Haram or help them in some way? And so traditionally, the United States has always addressed terrorism from a three-tier type of approach where you address it from a diplomatic standpoint, the defense, and then development. So when the president decided to end aid, it was devastating. Like we didn't have anything to do. Like what is happening here? Like that's the core of USAID. We receive money from the American taxpayer and we implement these programs, and these programs were approved by Congress. So what was happening behind the scenes? There was lots of emergency meetings, trying to update us on what's happening. And the sad part about it, we didn't really see much information flow coming from the DC section because it was just all in disarray over there. They had put our senior level leadership on administrative leave. So once that happened, then it's kind of like, okay, how do you know what to do on the ground? And then once they put them administratively, I think maybe a week later, our website was down. And I was like, what? Like, how? Like, this is the U.S. government. Like, how would you take down the website? And then the president was like, bashing the agency. And I mean, the agency has been doing this for 60 years, and we have made tremendous, huge, efforts within these countries and have a huge success, like cutting down HIV/AIDS, reducing poverty, trying to make sure countries adhere to democratic goals because that's what the people want and that's going to maintain some type of political stability in the country. So to just see it just shut down like that, it was really disheartening. This was done like so chaotically and it was illegal and it wasn't done properly, like just laying off government employees like that. That wasn't done within the legal framework. There was all these lawsuits that were happening to stop this. So we were like hoping the legal system would defend USAID in our work. We were hoping that like former ambassadors, former mission directors will be on TV to kind of like dispute what the president was saying about USAID. No one came to our aid, at least not in a way that was successful. We weren't allowed to talk to the media. We weren't allowed to talk to our implementing partners. Like we were working with local Nigerian organizations, and we weren't able to connect with them. And they were emailing us, calling us, and we couldn't respond. It was like that song Davido, unavailable. Like we were literally.
That is hilarious. You're even doing the dance.
we were
So the US government was unavailable.
Yes, the U.S. government was unavailable.
They send me to a land so far, a suitcase full of dreams and scars. I walked the dirt roads, felt the heat, a stranger's language, the drum's heartbeat. Foreign policy blues, what do we choose? We give and we take, but who really pays? Foreign policy blues, a life to lose in the name of a cause. We drift through the haze.
The A-Force podcast continues now. Tell me about the day you heard it. The first day you got the news.
Well, it was on inauguration day. It was a day of inauguration. That's when the whole cards fell. Being in the development sector, I was new to all of this. Originally, people thought that this was just going to be okay. They said we were going to have a 90-day pause. And we had, like say malaria medication that needed to be distributed. All of that had to stop. So it was just sitting in a warehouse somewhere and not going to the people who needed it.
So you've talked about this on the policy side. I want to talk about it personally for you. You had spent 7 months getting to love this country, getting to know this country. You had packed up your life in bags from the US, gone to Nigeria, and just 7 months later, you had to pack up and leave again. How was it for you emotionally? Walk me through how that emotional process was for you, just getting settled and then this happening.
It was exhausting. It was just tiring. Every day, we were told we had to go to work and then there was nothing to do because we weren't getting information from the White House. Like there wasn't any policy directive on how we should close. You can't take it personally, but it kind of was personal. Like you were affected. We were the ones who had to make a decision. There were points where we decided, well, should we stay in Africa or, what's happening in the U.S.? I'm not too excited to come back. We had to pull our kids out of school. Like we had to start to get them out of school. First, we thought they were going to leave in the middle of the school year, but then we were given time to at least have them finish a school year. And, my son was starting to make friends and starting to blossom and really mature in Nigeria. And then we had all of this happen. People were really scared about like their future, how they were going to plan for, you have retirement, you have college plans for your children. And beyond that, like you thought your work meant something. And then to be fired and pushed out, it's just really heartbreaking.
You wanted to do good in the world, in the international space, help fight poverty and inequality. And the biggest platform that you could possibly do that on, got scrapped. How did that affect your sense of purpose in this world?
Yeah, it did because I had tried so many years to get into USAID. It wasn't an easy government agency to get into because they wanted people to have language skills. You need to have international experience and particularly international and development experience. So that would require you working for an NGO or World Food Organization. I've kept in touch with some of the people that we worked with, so that's my way of still doing development work. I'm helping this nonprofit there. They work with displaced children in northern Nigeria and Adamawa State, so I'm helping them with communication, fundraising. So that's my way of doing development work. It did give me a loss of confidence in government. It also put a lot of scars on me emotionally with jobs anyways, because if someone can literally, you pack up your life, your whole house, you put it on the ship, you hope all your stuff gets there in one piece, and then you're told, oh, we don't need you anymore. It just makes you feel like you're disposable, you don't have any value, you're not adding any value. And now the USAID is gone. We see what's happening in Nigeria now. USAID had democracy and governance programs. There was a partnership, and now we're going off to military threats. So people really didn't understand what we were doing. They just thought it was corrupt and we were just giving away money, but yet there's still poverty. But at the same time, poverty is very, especially in developing countries, very complex. It's not so much foreign aid, but it's also like governance, like how the local government is distributing whatever income they're getting from taxpayers and revenue from that to provide public goods in education, good roads, good healthcare, etc. And then you have a global system that constantly keeps African countries down, both politically, economically. So it's a whole ecosystem, and USAID played a huge role with reducing global poverty. And now that we're gone, it's just going to be quite interesting to see what's going to happen next. But
during our pre-interview, you made a statement. You said, we left the way the British left Nigeria. What did you mean by that?
When the British left Nigeria, they just left. I mean, there wasn't any like real transfer of knowledge and power. It was just like, okay, we kind of like worked with one particular ethnic group over another. So I guess they're going to be the ones in power. Then you had this whole civil war. And that's how I feel like USAID left. Like, we left, we didn't transfer anything, not because we didn't want to, but because we weren't, we worked for the President of the United States, regardless of what he says about us, like being radical lunatics. When you work in the U.S. government, especially when you serve abroad, and people don't even talk about politics at work, and you don't even know what people's political views, because it's just an unwritten rule not to like express your political views working for the U.S. government. Like, that's just a big no-no, and it's a career blunder too. So no one does it. You just implement the policy, and that's it. And that's what we did. Like, we just left. There was no transfer. We didn't talk to the host government too much. I'm sure the ambassador had meetings here and there, but there just wasn't a proper drawdown of the agency. That's why I say we left like the British.
But looking back now, do you wish you had stuck with pre-med?
Well, those pre-med dreams are still there.
So are you saying you're going to go back to medical school?
I'm thinking about it. I'm keeping all options open.
It's never too late.
Yeah.
Maybe
I can squeeze in a decade of medical service before I retire.
I'm rooting for you. You can do it. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast, talking about memorable moments all across Africa. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your journey with us.
I really enjoyed this conversation.
To our listeners, if today's conversation moved you, inspired you, or taught you something new, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Leave a comment, share this episode with someone, and follow us on all platforms at the AA Force Podcast. This is the AA Force Podcast, where we honor the courage it takes to build a new life in America. I'm Aneta Felix, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.